Good afternoon. My name is Charlotte Harding. I am the Director of Professional Development here at NGA, and I'm joined today by my colleague Rani, our Head of Advice. And we're going to be talking today about safeguarding, but very much about sort of culture and context as opposed to purely considering compliance. Just a few housekeeping and etiquette rules, I suppose. You will be muted. Our webinars are more lecture-based and seminars rather than networking opportunities, but all of this information will come out to you. The slides and all of the resources that we talk about today will be forwarded by our events team. We're recording it, and that will be available on our website in the not too distant future. And of course, starting off with a huge thank you for everything that you do for the pupils and young people in your schools and trusts. So today's focus, we're going to be looking today at how governing boards can really go beyond compliance. Of course, that's very important when it comes to safeguarding, and we will be touching on it. But today's emphasis is very much on how schools and trusts can ensure that you have a child-centric approach to safeguarding. And without further ado, I will hand over to Rani to talk to you about our resources.
Everyone. So to start with, I just wanted to highlight some of the resources that we have for governing boards. Firstly, we have our safeguarding guide for governing boards, and this covers how to meet your safeguarding responsibilities from a strategic perspective and understanding how safeguarding policy works in practice. To sit alongside this, we have our safeguarding link governor or trustee role description, and this really focuses on how that individual can work with the DSL and what needs to be to the board. And I think most importantly, it's about how they can champion safeguarding and help ensure that it remains a strategic priority. Finally, our Learning Link e-learning module, which sets out how those governing can establish and monitor sound safeguarding practice and really create a safe school culture and environment. So next slide, please. So as Charlotte said, we're going to focus a lot more on sort of the culture of safeguarding rather than compliance. But I think it is still important to remember that those that govern have specific safeguarding responsibilities. And this includes ensuring that safeguarding policies and procedures are effective and that they comply with laws at all times, that all staff understand their roles and responsibilities and are able to discharge them. And finally, that the board has sufficient knowledge and capacity to fulfil its safeguarding responsibilities. So one document that you're all likely to be familiar with is the statutory guidance keeping children safe in education. And this is something that all governors and trustees will need to have regard to. So I will pause there for now and I'll pass you back to Charlotte.
Thanks, Rani. Some just brief, I suppose really this is about where we've heard from you. And it has been highlighted year on year of the increase in safeguarding concerns. And there's some information here briefly about results from our annual survey. So more than half of you have said that there has been an increase in safeguarding concerns and that there are three very specific areas of concern. But I think that this very much links to the wider context of society, I suppose, at the moment. All of those things that come along with issues that we've had with the cost of living crisis, etc., things and that have happened as a result of COVID and lockdown, and the impact and the long-term impact that's had on children and young people. But it is important to know that a lot of our work is dictated by the information that we collect in these governance surveys, and because of these type of concerns that you raise, things like today happen. So we've got some statistics here that are taken from the vulnerability toolkit, which we've produced. There is supportive guidance along here as well, which, as I said at the beginning, will be sent out to you. But educational disadvantage is a very nuanced term, but for the purpose of our work, we looked at those who are most likely to be vulnerable or already are to safeguarding concerns. A word of caution, and please bear in mind that this is from a statistical perspective. We're not labelling or suggesting that anyone makes assumptions of children that may fall into these categories. And in fact, not all that do have educational disadvantage. But some of this data is quite shocking, especially when you consider that 29% of all children in the UK currently live in poverty. That's 4.2 million children, which has been a considerable increase over the last decade. 2010, 2011 statistics put that figure at 3.6. So nearly a million more children live with these kind of challenges that they did a year ago. So as I said, we've created guidance and toolkits to support you, to support those children and young people who are more likely to be vulnerable than their peers. So governing boards, of course, fulfil their safeguarding duties by providing strategic leadership that really should support an overarching culture of safeguarding. And of course, it's our role to check that that culture has been embedded. It's not something that we just talk about, but we live and breathe in our schools and trusts. And an effective safeguarding culture is characterised by ensuring that safeguarding and child protection underpins all elements of school life, and that school and trust systems, all of those processes and policies that we look at, operate and have the best interests of children at their heart. Everything that we do should be driven by what we have and those high aspirations for our children. And, a culture that supports an environment where pupils feel confident to approach a member of staff if they've got a worry or problem. And really, more importantly, I suppose, that they know that their wishes and feelings are taken into account when determining what action to take, that children don't feel done to, but are involved in the decisions that ultimately affect their lives. So we've talked briefly about the importance of policies, which actually, when they're well written, when they're implemented and monitored efficiently, really should determine and drive excellent practice. But it's important to consider actually that in the same way that safeguarding is interwoven as a golden thread in all that we do, the safeguarding policy as well should not sit in isolation. And far more policies than that one sole document should underpin and support that robust approach to safeguarding. So it is worth reviewing and revising other things that you do in school and making sure that they tie in with safeguarding. And as I said, the importance of having that sort of child at the centre of all that you do. We'll talk a little bit in a minute about training and safeguarding training in particular. But actually, what our practice needs goes far beyond mandatory safeguarding. There sometimes needs to be more focus on particular areas of concern that staff feel really empowered to identify and act on potential safeguarding concerns. And actually, Rani will talk shortly on the importance of both national and local context. And it really is worth bearing both those in mind when you consider what support staff may need. Some of those key areas are highlighted on this slide, actually, and that toolkit that we've mentioned, that we've produced along with guidance, signposts boards to sources of support, which of course you can share with leaders. They can also really empower you actually in your meetings to act as prompts when asking leaders about training and CPD that staff have received, and really sort of whether it matches the specific safeguarding challenges your school or trust may be facing. But it's really important to note here that empowering staff is much more than training. And this sort of brings us back to that sort of safeguarding culture again. And it is worth considering whether you feel or know that staff are empowered to speak up. Do you have that culture where you provide a really safe environment for staff to raise concerns without fear of retribution, without the fear of being vilified for getting it wrong? Is there a fear that speaking up can cause more problems? And do you need to do something about a wider reaching culture to really, as I said, empower those staff to do what's right and what's best for that child? And it's also worth noticing that when we say all staff, we don't just mean leaders and teachers. We mean all staff. So yes, teaching staff, but also the office staff, lunchtime supervisors, whoever might be managing before and after school clubs. Do you have that whole staff approach? So we keep returning to the importance of cultivating a culture of trust, and that governors and trustees should really seek evidence of how pupil and parents' carer voice is absolutely central to this. There's a link actually on this slide that we'll send, which is an article that Fiona Fearon, our policy and research manager, wrote for Place to Be, and it's a great read actually, and really reflects on how you can do that. But building meaningful relationships is foundational to cultivating that culture where pupils will share and disclose their safeguarding concerns. Have you considered whether this is happening in your setting? We've just talked about empowering staff, but are we empowering children to do that as well? And we talked there a little bit about that deficit discourse, which is the barrier to pupils sharing their concerns. They want to be heard and empowered, not seen as a problem to be fixed. And this really starts with you as governors and trustees setting that culture that holds the whole community in high regard. Working in partnership to ensure that everyone feels they belong to all aspects of school life. It's a huge enabler of effective safeguarding. And in fact, Fiona shared an experience with Rani and I recently, where a number of years ago, before she worked for NGA, she was director of safeguarding in quite a big trust. And she was talking about the honour that she had of working with one of the most inspirational people that she has to date. It was a 13-year-old, and she had been permanently excluded from her previous school for persistent defiance, smoking on school grounds, and lots of other issues that resulted in this exclusion. And Fiona was saying that on her first day, she arrived exactly 45 minutes late. And that continued every single day for the next 6 months. She was rude, abrasive, took absolutely no nonsense, regardless of whether they were staff or students. She was angry and defiant all of the time. But what the staff could see, that behind those breaches of almost every section of the behaviour policy was actually quite a resilient young person, surviving probably as best as she knew how. And because that culture was there of empowerment, the robust safeguarding culture, what that trust were able to pull out was actually the story behind it. So she talked about, before coming into school 45 minutes late every single morning, bold as brass, she was actually responsible for getting her younger sister up. She had to get her ready for school every morning. She was living in a house where her mother was an alcoholic, and actually, to stop her going into DTs every single day, every morning she had to pour out little glasses of alcohol for her mum to drink throughout the day to prevent her going into shock. She then had to get her sister to school and actually rushed to get to her school as early as she could manage, but that was 45 minutes late. And she showed such bravery and determination to get there in the first place. She was organised, she led her family, she was compassionate. And the story behind what really was an inconvenience to the education sector was one of absolute tragedy, really, but showed huge inspiration. So it's really important to remember that behind every single disadvantaged child, that there is a story that lays a really complex labyrinth of experiences, misunderstandings, and barriers. Obviously, this isn't every disadvantaged child's narrative, but it is far from unique. And the point is, if we miss the fact that these children experience these issues, they lose out on a far grander scale. They don't deserve to be done to or told who they can be or how they have to be, but they need engaging in your life. So as a starting point, they need to be educated on who they are and the skills that they have. And from a governing perspective, it's really helpful to think about disadvantage in these terms, and sometimes take a bit of a step back from that long list of initiatives, whatever that latest strategy is, and asking what we know about how we define and approach disadvantage, and really sort of thinking about those impacts and successes for children. Rani.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, so as Charlotte's touched upon, the training element is so important, whether it's staff or what I'll talk about now, which is governing board training. So as with so much of the governance role, good training is key in ensuring that those governing have the necessary skills and knowledge to carry out their role effectively, and that they feel confident in providing that all-important oversight and challenge. But unlike some other areas, safeguarding training is mandated in the statutory guidance for keeping children safe in education. And this requires all governors and trustees to receive appropriate safeguarding and child protection training, and that includes online safety. Their expectation is that this should form part of the board's induction programme and be refreshed annually. Now, there is little guidance on the details of this training, and the slide that's currently on show sets out what we think the training should cover. So our view is that it should equip the board with the knowledge to provide strategic challenge, which will include being able to assure themselves that safeguarding policies and procedures are effective. It should be tailored to governance and so not focus on the day-to-day operational management of safeguarding. Therefore, it will deliver from, therefore, what you may have for the DSL for other school staff may not be appropriate for governors. Even within the governing board, the training may differ. For example, a lead safeguarding governor or trustee may require more detailed coverage of the topic than other governors and trustees on the board. And any training will also need to take into account the specific context of your school and your trust, especially in the case of local governance in maths. You'll need to consider the Academy Committee's delegated responsibilities. Now, there is no specific format for this training, and so you should decide on a format that suits your governors and trustees. So this could be something like an in-person training session, maybe an e-learning module, or simply reading training materials. What matters is that it equips the governing board to carry out their role effectively. Also, any training undertaken should be recorded, and this will help demonstrate the board's actions in relation to the monitoring of safeguarding during anything like an assessment or an audit. Next slide, please.
Apologies, Rani, sorry, would you be able to take your headphones off? It appears that your mic is breaking slightly.
Okay, cool. Any better?
Just say something again?
Is that any better now?
Yes. Thank you.
Right. Charlotte mentioned context, and in order to have an effective approach to safeguarding, the school or the trust needs to ensure that their approach takes into account the national, local, and school context of the school or the trust. The safeguarding is more than meeting the minimum legal requirements. It's about keeping children safe, and so schools and trusts need to go beyond the minimum. They also need to tailor their approach so it meets the needs of their pupils. So in the first instance, schools and trusts need to consider the national picture. The board should have an understanding of the national picture and what that means for your settings. For example, I think we'll all remember when peer-on-peer abuse was put into the spotlight a couple of years ago. And this made many schools stop and think about how this applied to their settings and their pupils, and some altered their policies accordingly. The local picture is also pivotal, and boards and senior leaders should think about how what is happening locally could impact their pupils. Now, this knowledge will largely come from your local Safeguarding Children's Board, who will have regular communication with the DSL within your setting. It may also come in the form of an awareness of the specific issues of your community that they may be facing. So, for example, exploitation, increasing levels of crime linked to poverty, etc. The local Safeguarding Children's Board will communicate local information, such as contextual safeguarding issues facing children and young people in your area and your community, and could highlight appropriate training opportunities. But in addition to knowing the general, national and local picture, schools and trusts need to know what their picture looks like. What safeguarding concerns are most relevant to your pupils? What are the risks that they're facing? Now, this clear understanding of the challenges faced by pupils within your setting is essential to avoid generalising and will help ensure an effective approach to safeguarding. Next slide, please. Safeguarding should be central to conversations around the school trust strategy and development. It should be considered how safeguarding is reflected in the strategy or development plan. Think about what your key goals are and how progress will be measured and what a successful completion will look like. The board should ask themselves whether they understand the safeguarding strengths and areas for development in their school or trust. If there have been any safeguarding incidents, questions should be asked on what lessons have been learned, and if necessary, what changes have been made. It's vital that boards develop a good understanding of how safeguarding works in practice, and this will largely be done through observing, listening, and discussing. So when we're talking about observing, this can mean looking at data and thinking about what it tells you about the school's safeguarding procedures and its overall context. For example, are there trends emerging from maybe the number of looked after pupils, attendance rates, exclusions, behaviour incidents? When governors and trustees are carrying out school visits, what is your experience of safeguarding behaviour and culture in practice? What are you seeing? What are you hearing when you're talking to people? Is staff training effective? Are staff approachable and accessible? Boards will also need to listen to those responsible for implementing safeguarding practice and those that are otherwise involved in safeguarding in your school. So staff, for example, will be able to give an insight on the safeguarding culture in the school and how policies and procedures work in practice. The views of those who are affected by safeguarding practices should also be considered. For example, pupils and parents will be experiencing those policies and practices firsthand. And so this will help boards understand their experiences and the school's safeguarding procedures. In addition to this, the views of external agencies such as the local authority could also be sought. So once you've got all that information, it's then really important that these findings are then discussed at board level. So where appropriate, school visits will give the opportunity to discuss culture and practice with your senior leaders and help establish and maintain an open and transparent safeguarding culture. In board meetings, safeguarding could be a standing item on the agenda. This will give meetings the room for the head teacher and the DSL to share headline information on safeguarding incidents and provide details on the steps being taken to reduce this. This kind of feedback can also kickstart conversations on any strategic decisions that may need to be made. For example, do any of the policies need reviewing? As Charlotte said, it doesn't always have to just be the child protection and safeguarding policy, but safeguarding could run through other policies as well. Is maybe additional resource required? Does staffing need to be looked at? Do other training courses need to be purchased? Finally, when making decisions, due regard should be given to safeguarding, discussing the potential safeguarding implications of the board's decision making. Decisions such as maybe changing the timings of the school day may have safeguarding implications, and so these should be considered when those discussions are being had. Next slide, please. So keeping children safe in education also states that boards should have a senior board level or equivalent lead to take leadership responsibility for the school's safeguarding arrangements. This essentially means in practice that the board needs to appoint a link governor or trustee who will lead on the board's approach to monitoring safeguarding across the school or the trust. Now, there are considerations that will need to be made in relation to maths, but I'll cover that off later. One of the key relationships the link governor or trustee will need to cultivate is their relationship with the DSL. Now, as we mentioned before, understanding the context in which your school or trust is operating in is key to properly assessing how well your school or trust is performing in regards to safeguarding. In addition to this, understanding the specific safeguarding challenges that your school faces and that your DSL faces will help you provide the necessary support and challenge. When understanding the context, it can also make it easier to understand the settings, strengths, and areas where improvements can be made. And it's these one-to-one conversations between the link governor and trustee and the DSL which really give you the opportunity to discuss, anonymously of course, safeguarding incidents and consider whether the policies and the practices currently in place remain fit for purpose. More widely, discussions could be had on the monitoring of safeguarding priorities. It's also key that the DSL and other staff within the school or the trust have had the necessary CPD opportunities, and where appropriate, learning has been disseminated across the staff team. Now, as Charlotte's mentioned, safeguarding is becoming more of an issue for schools. And unfortunately, not only are they increasing in quantity, but actually the incidents are becoming more serious. And this can have a big impact on the mental health and well-being of staff. And so alongside the practical training, you also need to consider about what help there is available for staff. Is there perhaps some sort of helpline that they can call? Are there procedures in place where staff can actually offload and just ensure that their mental health is taken care of as well? The link governor trustee will be best placed to understand how safeguarding works in practice. Now, alongside being familiar with the statutory guidance, the link governor trustee should be familiar with and understand the school or trust's policies and procedures. They should seek assurances that these are effective, up to date, and regularly reviewed. School visits are a great opportunity to see how these work in practice. But safeguarding practice is not just about policies and procedures and dealing with those major safeguarding incidents. It's also about empowering your pupils and ensuring that they are provided with the knowledge and the skills and the confidence to keep themselves safe. Therefore, the link governor trustee should ask about how safeguarding is built into the curriculum. For example, how are pupils taught about staying safe online? And it's important to remember that safeguarding is no different in regards to the other duties that governors and trustees undertake. And so it's important that they remain strategic. And this means that in practice, they're not expected to be able to assess the success of operational implementation of policies and practices. Instead, we would expect schools and trusts to be undertaking regular safeguarding assessments and audits. And the link governor's role within this is to review these and ask about what the next steps are and to track that progress. In regards to data, although the governing board is likely to be looking at headline data and asking questions about possible trends, the link governor and trustee is likely to do this in greater detail. But it is important to remember that safeguarding remains a governing board responsibility. And so it's imperative that there is also regular reporting to the board. This would involve sharing details of the meetings they have with the DSL, championing safeguarding at board meetings and ensuring that safeguarding remains a key strategic priority and it is considered in board decision making. And as mentioned, schools and trusts should be undertaking safeguarding assessments and audits, and these results should also be shared with the board so they can also maintain their oversight. Next slide, please. So I did say that I was going to come back to this, and I really just wanted to briefly cover how trust boards of maths can help ensure that safeguarding is governed effectively across all the schools within a trust. And maths will want to ensure that safeguarding culture and policies are consistent throughout all of their schools, and that is perfectly reasonable. But the need for consistency needs to be balanced with the need to account for different characteristics of schools within the trust. This can be achieved by adopting an overarching safeguarding and child protection policy that reflects all schools within the trust and is developed through collaboration between the trust and the school. Now, if appropriate, policy amendments may be necessary to reflect the safeguarding priorities of individual schools. And this is really a conversation for schools and local academy committees to have with the trust board. In regards to staff in charge of safeguarding, trusts could consider appointing someone at executive leadership level to coordinate safeguarding activity across all schools within the MAT. But this individual would work similar to a DSL based on a school, but they would be working on a larger scale across all the schools. They could help ensure that resources and knowledge is being shared effectively and provide valuable support to school level DSLs. Similarly to having trust and local oversight when it comes to DSLs, where MATs have academy committees with sufficient delegated responsibility, we recommend that each academy committee also appoints a safeguarding lead. The lead trustee from the trust board should then facilitate the sharing of knowledge. This could be done through a shared briefing or maybe meetings of the link members. Just a note on the oversight of safeguarding arrangements in a MAT. We did identify that this is one of the 4 areas that should be delegated to local governance, and boards should ensure that it's clear how information and priorities are disseminated. Now, this would include that ensuring compliance with school and trust-wide policies and statutory requirements. But as with anything that is delegated, although the monitoring can be delegated, it is important to remember that the trust board should still remain oversight, as they will be the ones that remain accountable. Next slide, please. So these next couple of slides just really contain some questions that you might find helpful, perhaps during board meetings or when the link governor or trustee meets with the DSL. Some will relate to staffing and emphasises the importance of ensuring that, as well as making sure that staff have the necessary training, they are also provided with the necessary time and space to carry out their role. Ongoing management of safeguarding can be something that is sometimes pushed to the bottom of the list because it's not necessarily urgent in that moment, but it is really important that staff are given the time and the space and just the thinking time to really think about what they want to do and how they can continue to improve policies and procedures. Final slide, again, just has a few more questions. And it is really just about making sure that schools and trusts are engaging with those sort of external agencies and really understanding what their pupils need. So on that note, I'll hand over back to Charlotte.
Thank you very much, Rani. That was really helpful. That actually brings us to the end of the main part of our webinar. We've got some further slides here that talk about the resources that are available to you through NGA membership, and also things that are widely available on our website. And we will send those through to you rather than me sort of reading them out all here today. However, I did want to take the opportunity to highlight to you that bookings are open today for our national conference in the summer. So it's in Birmingham, which we're hoping is central for the majority of people. And we have got some high profile keynote speakers. You'll hear from a wide range of NGA voices, and we've got a great range of bespoke workshops that cater to all of you that govern within all types of settings. So whether that's, maintained primary school or, a sort of PRU within a trust, we've sort of got all bases covered. So it's a full day and a pretty sort of packed schedule, but they're also a great opportunity for you to network with other people that do similar roles than you. So as much as it's great to hear from us and other speakers, that networking opportunity that's available to you, we would really encourage you to take up. So as I said, bookings are available and open today. Again, we'll send these through to you, and there will be a link on there for you to register your attendance. And we've got these upcoming events that, again, we would recommend that you engage with as much as possible. Pick the ones that are most appropriate to you, but when the slides are sent out, there will be links to the right event for you. So we'll finish there. As I said, we've got some further slides which we'll send out so you can look through at your leisure. They talk a little bit about the membership benefits of NGA and the things that you'll have access to should you be a member. And actually, this one in particular with the information and resources that are available behind that membership wall in our knowledge centre are invaluable. There's well over 200 pieces of guidance and support there that you will have access to. But I will end by saying thank you very much for spending your lunch with us. We hope it's been useful and covered the type of thing that you were expecting. As I said at the beginning, we didn't want to sort of focus too much on compliance, but really talk to you about the importance of underpinning a really robust safeguarding culture throughout your school or trust. Any further questions that you might have when our events team send the slides out, you'll have the opportunity to ask those. Please do let us know. And if you have the opportunity to complete any feedback form, again, we'd very much appreciate it. It's important that we learn from your comments. But thank you very much. I hope you have a nice rest of the day, and we will stop there. Thank you.